Hey everybody, how is everybody? So thank you and welcome to our webinar. We have over 300 people attending today, which is just absolutely fantastic. We would not have been able to do that had this been originally planned in the Denver showroom. So thank you everybody, and thank you to Klaus and Russ and Charles and Sean and Abigail for making yourselves available for this. And I think we're going to have a really great panel. I am going to let everybody introduce themselves and kind of give a little bit of a background, and then we'll go into our panel discussion. And after that, we will have a Q&A session. We will try and get to everybody's questions, but in the event that we don't, we will reach out to you individually and contact you and try and answer your questions that way. So let's get started, and we'll start with me. I'm Gale Singer. I'm the founder and president of Circa Lighting, and I'm just really happy to be able to be around this great group of people who are just very passionate about what we all do. So I'll hand it over to Charles.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here too. My name is Charles Neal. I'm Executive Vice President of Visual Comfort and Company. The reality is I'm a lamp maker from Ohio. So for the last 30 years, I've been just in love with making lamps and lighting. I'm here just representing the maker in the group. I also agree it's awesome to be here.
Sean?
Hi, I'm Sean Lavin. I'm the Chief Design Officer for Visual Comfort & Co. I'm the primary designer for tech lighting. I look forward to this conversation, and thanks for joining.
Abigail?
Hi, I'm Abigail Sorensen, and I run the training center that Sean's in right now, actually, for Visual Comfort and Company in Illinois. And I'm here in Chicago. I got a degree in interior design. I love interiors, but I found lighting while I was still in school. I've never practiced interior design. I've practiced lighting for 20 years, and it's a really fun and passionate topic for me to intermingle the two.
Excellent. And Klaus and Russ are special guests today.
First of all, thank you for having us. We really appreciate it, Gale and team.
Yeah.
I'm Russ Jenkins. I'm the CEO of WRJ Design Associates. We are in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I have been in the design business for over 35 years. I started as a landscape architect, and then director of design of exhibits at Sotheby's in New York City. And now we focus primarily on interior design and on occasion exhibit design.
Excellent.
And I'll echo the heartfelt gratitude. We're so grateful to you guys for having us on today. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for watching us today. I hope it's fun and informative. My name is Klaus. I'm the CEO or the COO of WRJ Design. And we moved out here from New York about 10 years ago to Jackson, Wyoming, and absolutely love it. And I run all the operations of the company, although I do have a design degree a graduate degree from Parsons in New York. So here we are.
Well, before we get started, we do have a special treat for some of you. So this is Klaus and Russ's new beautiful book that I'm so grateful to have, because I want to live in every single room that's in it. And we are going to gift this book to the first 25 registrants for the panel discussion. So again, yay, and we'll be reaching out to you. And so, the early bird catches the worm. So congratulations to you, whoever you are. And we'll get started. So the topic for the discussion was talking about modern lighting, and we'll obviously get more in depth into that. But let's go around and just discuss what your definition of modern is and what it means to you. And again, I think we'll just go around and start with Charles.
All right, thanks, Gale. Interesting.
I'll mix it up a little bit.
That's good. That's good. Interesting enough, because the term modern, when you just hear the word, it puts up an image in your mind for anybody. Even if you're not even thinking about lighting, the word modern puts an image in your mind. But for me, to thinking about what modern is, it's really about whatever the folks who are leading us are asking us to do going forward. And while it may mean a lot of things to a lot of people, I've always just thought of it as what I'm looking at look and feel like the thing that I get in my head when I hear the word, because it's a fluid word. It's going forward. And right now, when I think of modern in the world we live in lighting, I really think more of the light. It's modern light as opposed to modern lighting. So whereas a couple of years ago, modern was a look, and I think now it's actually, the term modern is more applying to the modern type of light. And, you know, for the professional designer out there and their clients who are driving everything, it really is, what do they want from us next? And that's modern.
Awesome. Sean?
Yeah, so, you know, I wrestle with modern and contemporary as a designer, and I define modern as being a bit softer, you know, with the use of warm finishes. We use a lot of integrated LED, so when you introduce brass, I think that becomes a bit of a softer approach. I think of clean lines when we're designing for modern. And then if we're looking at different materials, how do we use that in a more modern application versus a traditional application?
Excellent. And Abby?
When I think of modern lighting, I really kind of go to the technology and the source of LED and the amazing new things that we can do with light now that we have this technology, because the form is far different, and it with a very small form, you're able to generate a tremendous amount of impact. And that's really changing the way that we're lighting interior spaces.
Great, terrific. So we on the visual comfort Circa side know why lighting is so important, but we'd like to hear from you, Klaus and Russ, about how important lighting is into the projects that you do.
Yeah, lighting is extremely important. We have a philosophy that lighting is like the jewelry of the house. It's, you know, if you have a beautiful outfit or dress, and then, you know, really what's the jewelry that's going to finish the entire ensemble. And so in our interiors, you know, lighting is that. It is the jewelry. And so you have to get it right. It has to be something that you can really appreciate. And I think it's something you really want to invest in, because ultimately lighting is the ambiance, the romanticism of the home, and it has to be right.
And I would just add to that and just say, you know, one of the things we were thinking about as we were thinking about today is, you know, a sense of timelessness. You know, it's one thing to say modern, which I know that was the original question, but having the ability to find beautiful pieces that have a timeless appeal is really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about some of, you know, we kind of don't love the word trends, but we're going to use it here for this lack of another word for right now. But what are some of the modern lighting trends that you're seeing now? So Charles, I'm going to ask you first as a maker to talk to that.
Well, you did bring up the fact that we don't like to think of the word trends, because sometimes it's almost like there's some materials, when you describe them a certain way, they bring a negative thing. But trends are important, especially if you're someone like Circa Lighting or Visual Comfort and Company or our guests here, because you like to be focused on setting a trend. And, you know, for us, I think about in lighting in general, in this modern space that we're in, I think the biggest trend in modern really is based on sort of 50-year period. So something's modern in 1920, and it's modern again in 1970, and here it is modern again coming up in 2020. But the thing, and Abigail brought it up, and Sean alluded to it a little bit too, the thing that is so modern right now is the light. I mentioned it earlier. And so the trend is finding ways to not think about the challenges you used to have in where the light would come from. Because now in design and in manufacturing as a maker, you can just eliminate from your mind the limitations that the light source had to do. You know, you'd make something, and the first thing you had to think of was, well, where do we put the light? But now you can just completely design and come up with something amazing. It can become the jewelry, or it can fade into the background, and you don't have to think about where the light will come from, because as Abigail pointed out, it can come from the tiniest place, and it can be great light from the tiniest place. So the trend I see is in eliminating the source of light as a design constraint.
Awesome. So Klaus and Russ, let's talk about what you're seeing in the, you know, in the world of design, interior design.
Yeah, I think it's a wide range, obviously, and you're seeing trends that are from contemporary lighting to traditional lighting, and it all depends on the interior that's being created. But I do agree with Charles. I think the thing that you see is if you can avoid seeing the source of the light for the accent architectural lighting, that's key, whether it's interior or exterior. So many places in cities and towns have dark sky ordinances. And so it's really important to be able to find those lights that fall within the dark sky where you can't see the source of the light. And that's not always easy. You find some lights that are really great for outdoors, but then it doesn't follow that ordinance. But I think the uplighting, I think the downlighting, I think the accent lighting that you find in a lot of the European, or even we were recently in Japan with the DLN group, and that sort of lighting that is subtle, that creates ambiance and creates mood architecturally, I think it takes time, and you have to really study that. And then you have, again, as I mentioned, the jewelry. So what is the iridescent quality of that light? What are you planning to do with the light? And the trend on that, I think, is you see currently, beautiful thick glass, or just a gorgeous softness in the glass that is kind of a timeless, because it also is very romantic and soft. So obviously every interior has calls for the appropriate lighting, and I think that's key as well, that you make sure the lighting accentuates the architecture and is in harmony with that architecture.
Yeah, terrific. So Sean, as a designer of lighting that is really always be considered modern, whether you want to interchange modern or contemporary, what are you seeing anything different than you would have seen, a couple of years ago or when you started designing?
Well, I think everyone's touched upon it. It's these these form factors are getting smaller and smaller with LED. LED is getting, it's improving, year over year, right? Better quality, smaller chip platforms that you can integrate into smaller applications. So on the decorative side, you see that trend, and everyone really kind of latching on. Our job as designers is to make sure the silhouette doesn't look a little too crazy. We try to tone it down, make it a bit more, again, soft versus a very contemporary look. And then we look at modern lighting in the sense of recessed. Recessed modern has come a long way. These small apertures, with LED being so small, we're able to do this almost quiet ceiling appearance where you don't see these big 6-inch downlights or 4-inch downlights, and the light almost disappears. And the light now becomes a source to help graze or paint different areas of the home. And that's, what kind of gets us excited on the tech lighting side in particular, is that we're able to leverage a lot of the things that we're doing on the architectural, bring it to the decorative side, and have this really nice balance of light.
Terrific. And, speaking of balance, we'd like to talk about balancing the technical aspect of all the technology that's out there with LED and small apertures, and then how we incorporate that into more traditional designs, which is, I'm going to pose that to Charles as the maker of what has primarily been a very traditional maker, and now is really getting to a lot more modern designs as well, but also keeping the traditional designs and using more modern technology in them.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It ties back to something that Rush said, I think, that and I'm having a little bit of trouble keeping up. There's so many great points being made, and it's sort of my personality to jump in on every point. So about the fact that thinking about something that's timeless, traditional and timeless are words that go together very well. Modern and timeless typically don't go together that well. And then when you think of timeless, traditional, and technology, those words aren't things that go together well. So it is a challenge. But he's talking about glass and the thick glass and iridescent qualities. And if you go back in time to when people were first bringing fire indoors to create light, and then refining fire into candle light before they were using oil, they would love to take fire and have it have the light from the fire go in through iridescent and luminescent and transparent and refracting materials such as glass and alabaster and rock crystal and everything. And now with the ability to bring light into those spaces, seems challenging, but imagine a rock crystal Versailles cage chandelier that for years you used, and it had a typical candelabra socket and it had a light bulb and maybe you put a shade. Well, now you can make the same cage chandelier. You can have rock crystals hanging in front of the iron and have the light come from a little narrow point inside the iron. So you've got a traditional form with traditional material, traditional qualities of light passing and being transferred and transmitted through rock crystal, but you've eliminated the light source and created something really modern. So it can seem challenging. It's really just probably the biggest opportunity that I've ever come around. It's been such a terrific thing to be able to work with Sean, and we got together a few years ago and start looking at what he does with the small form factor and what he does with light, and then taking that opportunity and to bring it into traditional forms, because it is true, even our most modern things at Visual Comfort in the Visual Comfort signature collections are pretty traditional.
Yeah. And Abigail, as somebody who spends, all the time educating people on technology, like how do you see the customers? I know you've spent a lot of time, certainly with our company, in CEUs in a design community that has really pretty much been on the more traditional side. And obviously, as we get more involved in modern and tech lighting, that we'll be seeing more of this. How do you see what the customers are asking as, I really kind of want a more traditional looking piece, but I want it to do this?
Yeah, I think that the place to start is to kind of bring it back to some of the fundamentals of lighting. We talk a lot about layers of light, but really as people who are creating spaces, understanding the impact that light is going to have on that space. So no matter what the style is of the space that you're creating, you have an ambiance, as Rush mentioned, you have a mood that you're trying to go for, and you have an experience that you're trying to deliver. So as you begin to think about lighting as a tool to enhance that experience, visualize in your mind what it's like when you're in a moody restaurant and you have a point source just over the table. You have this real tight intimacy and this kind of glowing space that you're within. That's very cozy. Then think of a space where the ceiling is illuminated, completely open and bright and energetic. You really can drive the experience of the space by how you put the light into the space. And once you're thinking about lighting in that way, it doesn't really matter what tool you're using, right? Like you have the option of using very small, discrete architectural products to deliver that and keep the form, but you're gonna have the jewelry and the beauty of the space with the sculptural or artistic element that you're contributing from a decorative fixture. And by understanding how those each deliver light in different ways and starting with a plan to deliver the light in the way that you want, you have the whole toolbox to pick the light fixture that you want to use in your space, and it's kind of freeing and amazing.
And Klaus and Rush, how do you guys address that in your design as well? The aspect of technology with a more traditional interior.
So it's interesting. This is a challenge, I think, as lighting and LEDs are evolving fairly quickly. But I think the one thing that Charles has talked about, and on Abigail as well, is what is this romance? What is this feeling? I think that's the one thing you must strive to understand first and foremost, is what is the feeling you're trying to achieve in this room? And LED has had somewhat of a challenge with the white light versus the warm light for the halogens. It's getting much, much better. But I think if you think about feeling and ambiance and the fire you talked about, Charles, and the candles and the lumens, that has to be achieved through the ability to dim. There's nothing worse when you go into a room and you flip on the light switch and all of a sudden it's just bright and that's it. There's no option for anything else. You're like, oh my God, what happened?
Right. We will never understand that, how every single thing is not, my laundry room is on a dimmer. Nothing is not on a dimmer.
No, exactly. If I go to a home and it's even a renovation, the first thing I'm saying, like, put everything on a dimmer. I don't want to see one light without a dimmer. So, but the problem, I think, with modern technology that we see is that some lights and some fixtures and also LED, when you dim it, you get a flicker. And that is definitely a frustration for the client. It's a frustration for the designer. So the ability to make sure from the whole range of the dimming that there is no flickering, that there's just a constant, beautiful light coming out of that. And you see some of the European lights or other lights where you have to have additional transformer or something to connect that dimmer, and that's such a pain in the ass. So I think that that modern technology needs to meet our demands of what we want that room to feel like.
Yeah, we can
And the experience to be.
we can contest that. I mean, that's the hardest thing when you're designing with LED, right? And warm dim technology has come a long way. But you have this small light source that you're designing around, but then you have this huge brick of a transformer that meets all these different requirements, right? You have Title 24 flicker requirements. California, I mean, they set out all the tough requirements we need to meet, but it's achievable now, because before, years ago with LED, when you would dim it, the temperature of the light would never change, right? It would, if you're at 3000, it's 3000 all the way through, and it just looks gray, right? It doesn't get that sense of warmth and that candle ambience look you're going for.
Yeah.
And the benefit, again, of tech lighting, of kind of jumping in early, we've managed to kind of harness warm dim throughout color tuning, right? We're getting more and more with color tuning. So when you're dimming, you're going through the black body curve, and you're matching certain color tones that you want to achieve in the home. And it's exciting, but it's still early technology, right? And we're adapting constantly.
In response to what you were saying about the color and the dimming, on our side, in the decorative side, because in our world, visual comfort still primarily does decorative lighting. We're getting more architectural leaning. We're allowing for more productive light. But we've always started at the warm tone in our LED. We're at the 2700. And then we're passing the light, almost always passing the light or bouncing it off of a warm material. I know Sean's getting excited about using brass and our warm brass. The signature for Circa and visual comfort has always been an incredible warmth in all of our color. We don't really like, even our blue is a little gray, in our world. Even our white is a little a plaster color. We don't like to do harsh, cold, or bright. So it is great that we get this merge, that we can offer, the challenge you mentioned facing over time. We can offer, even right now, wonderful solutions where you can trust that on both sides of the fence, whether it's the architectural, the modern decorative, or our traditional decorative, that the LED light source is going to feel warm, and it's going to feel comfortable, and it's going to dim beautifully without any flicker. Which, that's why we were so late getting in at Visual Comfort. We didn't want to get in until it was flicker free and warm.
Well, we got in a good way because we had great partners to help us get there. We won't even get into what it was like for us to try and think about developing a recessed can. It's pretty funny, but I won't get into that now. But Abigail, while we're on this subject of lighting and light levels, talk to us a little bit about how you tell people to establish a clean, modern ceiling with the different aspects of lighting.
Great, yeah. Small aperture, or not even really small aperture, the key to a clean ceiling, I think, is having the source remotely located within the recessed can. So if you're working with a high quality product, it usually is recessed pretty far up into the can, and still the engineering of it allows a lot of light to come out. And the reason that's desirable is that then, with you're not seeing the point source, you're able to really focus your eye on what the light is doing and what it's impacting. And that leaves you with a clean ceiling, as well as the integration of the trim into the actual architecture of the space. So with Element, we have plaster or mud in option, where you can have a trimless integration, which leaves you with a shadowless, very clean, smooth ceiling. And those trims are all able to be painted, so you can paint them out to match the ceiling color, and they can integrate into a wood ceiling without a flange. So to me, that's kind of what you can do to get a clean ceiling, is use a tool that is very strategically designed to integrate beautifully into the materials.
And can you talk a little bit about also about how not every can is a can is a can? Because it's really a very misunderstood, and Sean is laughing, you know, it's a very misunderstood product in what the end result is going to be. And it's a hard sale because you may just see like 3 inches of this little piece of trim, and it's hard to get across the value of what the end result is going to be. So speak to that. You and Sean can both speak to that a little bit, and how important the quality is of the item that you're purchasing.
Sure. Well, we were just talking about dimming levels and flicker and the quality of that. And one of the first things that you're paying for when you upgrade your price point in architectural lighting is the driver. So by getting a higher quality driver, you have better output, you have less flicker, and you have better dimmability. But basically, all of the components inside a fixture, they have a performance that you want to understand what's happening. So when you are in a higher quality aimable product, like an element product, we can aim between 40 and 45 degrees aiming angle, which amounts to, you can get to the top of a piece of art if you have an art piece that goes a little higher on the wall. We have the ability to retract the light, bring it closer to the ceiling if you need that deep aiming angle and it's going to be aimed out of the eye's way, or bring it up higher and have that quiet ceiling appearance. You're really paying for a very much higher level of functionality and delivery of the performance of light into the space. It's just not the same as a commodity product, which is a wide open can. You're going to see the source, and it has much less control. You can't change the optics in the field. You can't adjust it in the field after it's installed, those kind of things. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah, listen, I agree. You know, Element, which is our brand of product, you know, it's our recess line. You know, our challenge to get it out in the field is the contractor usually specs that layer of the lighting package when they're building a home, right? It's not typically an interior designer. Some homes don't have a lighting designer. So it's after the fact that this product is not spec'd. If you can get it on the job early, and then the interior designer has it as a tool when they're lighting the space, you know, and we like to think about Element, you know, and Rush, like you were saying with landscape, right? Landscape lighting, you have dark sky application. And when you think of the practice of landscape, you're spotting a tree or a bush or a stone walkway or a wall. This type of product, you're able to do that in the home now, create these dramatic scenes, right? Graze a piece of art or family photos, you know, and you're creating visual interest and depth throughout the home with this type of product, and you don't see it at the ceiling. My home, I live outside of Chicago, more traditional style homes, big crown molding. I had 6-inch downlights everywhere, and it was in my space. Every time I'd walk in, I'd feel this light source take over, and it really would. Again, I'm more sensitive to it, but it would distract from everything else. So I tore the ceilings out. I put this Element product in, and it changed the whole appearance, right? It gives you more of a museum grade. You don't see the light source. And I'm able now to just really play with the light on certain areas that creates just a special, you know, dramatic look in the home.
So Klaus and Rush, how are you able to get your clients to understand the importance? Because it's a great expense to go through to use a high-end quality product like that. What challenges do you have in trying to get your client rather, to understand the importance of that?
We give them an ultimatum and say, either you do it or you don't.
I love that.
You're not a customer. You're not a customer.
It is education. I think that's where it starts. And I think that's you can do some of that through precedent imagery, but at the end of the day, you have to, again, feel it. It's hard to feel precedent imagery on a screen. So we do take our clients through some of homes that we've done that have, where someone has invested in great lighting and they brought on a lighting designer, and we work very closely. We just don't hand over the lighting design to the lighting designer, where you work hand in hand, because oftentimes we're the ones responsible for placing the art in the room and making sure that those family photos are lit, and making sure that that great sculpture or that piece of furniture or something on a coffee table, the special is going to be lit. And so there has to be a symbiotic relationship with the lighting designer to achieve that. But I think if someone's able to really see the effect of great lighting, and it is expensive. There's a product that we spec, it's TrueFig, where you can plaster right up to it. There's no trim. It's in the ceiling and also on the plates. But that is a very,
I use them in my house.
Yeah.
All my linear diffusers are TrueFig.
And it's not for the faint of heart. I think
It's not for the faint of heart.
It's a $250 a pop, to start with. And so,
Right.
you have to strategically think, okay, I'm not going to put a sofa. If I put a sofa or an end table there, then why would I spend that? But at the end of the day, for us, the architectural lighting, to achieve great lighting, is to have it be quiet.
Yes.
And to not see the source, and to not even realize that what you're experiencing, you're just experiencing the overall ambiance. And so if you identify the source and you're looking at a horrible aperture or some sort of trim, that's taken away from that harmony and what the intent is. And so great architectural lighting is very expensive. And I'll use an example. When Klaus and I were in New York, we were in the building down 15 Broad Street, which was, done by Philippe Stark. But when we got our apartment, we gutted it immediately, and there's the light that can be, there's three. It's kind of like Hermes has it in their stores, where there's three lights within a trimless, to the plaster, and it was expensive. But at the end of the day, when we did it, we were so happy, because the light was everything in the evening, and that's when it matters. Typically we're all at work, right? It's in the evening that really matters when you're at home.
Yeah, and then how would you say that architectural recessed lighting, works its way into what we're calling modern at this juncture?
I think it applies on so many levels to what we're doing in modern lighting. You see where in showers, if you plan for it, you can recess the drywall or the ceiling off of the tile, and you rake the stone or the tile with a beautiful recessed strip that when you walk in, it can just be an ambiance. It doesn't have to be when you're showering. It's that ambiance that you create. Or the LED, when you have a floating cabinet in a bathroom, that underneath the cabinet that gives a soft glow to the floor. There are pinpoint lights that you can put in the floor that do a little bit of architectural lighting on a great wood trim. So I think it's extraordinarily appropriate to what we do and applicable to what we do today. But it is expensive, and it also is very time consuming to detail that out and really research that. And a client has to understand that, that's not inexpensive on the design side. And if you bring experts in, then it's going to be even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was thinking about it as you guys were talking about this, and it just keeps on thinking about on the other side of it, where when we're making things, you mentioned dark sky, you mentioned that the light needs to be quiet. Those are some of the big opportunities that I talked about earlier in the decorative part, the jewelry part about now. And it's becoming, the designers are all saying, hey, you need to make the light quieter. We don't want to see where the light is coming from. We just want to see the piece. We want to see it lit. And it's an opportunity to merge these things in. And you keep talking, I love what the things you're saying about you got to plan for it and you've got to get the client ready for it. Because if you can get it all tied together and you give it over to someone instead of, to say, well, I want to make sure we do the overall light, the architectural and the decorative, and everything feels great together so that each part of it performs its own function in creating that mood and that experience, and not one comes after the other, or you do this in retrospect. But it is the forward-thinking thing that no matter what the decorative light form is, finding a way to make the light source become quiet, but still give great light. As Abigail was saying earlier about the ambient light, if the decorative item is what's going to give you the light, it still has to give you light just nobody wants to see it. Nobody wants to see the light anymore.
Well, and also part of that, I think,
Almost
is,
what you don't see.
Yeah.
and I think that oftentimes it's a combination, like in our bathroom, you'll see in our projects that you'll have the mirror and there's a cavity that's maybe an inch around the mirror that you get this soft glow from the sides. But then we'll oftentimes hang a pendant or two in front of the mirror, and that piece becomes the jewelry.
Yeah.
That is the combination of the two. We create something that's really special. So it doesn't become so stark and contemporary, but yet you can have that and then add the decorative element that really gives you that kind of joy of like jewelry, right? You find when someone's wearing a beautiful jewelry, you're just like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. We did a project where we designed an exhibit of the jewelry of Schlumberger. And then you look at the jewelry of Jean Schlumberger, it's just incredible. So if you can translate that to lighting, which we've had clients like, they go through some of the homes and they're like, oh my God, your lighting is incredible. So that's about, bespoke detailing, just time and detailing to make that harmony come together.
Right, because I think oftentimes people are caught between when do I use architectural, when do I use decorative, and there's really kind of a balance between the two. Abby, I'm sure you get this question a lot, right? How do I choose what to use? So how do you address that?
That's a great question. And I want to go back a little bit. I think it all kind of stems from a situation in the design world in that the architectural lighting is often kind of decoupled from the interior budget and the interior design portion, right? So a builder or an architect or even a contractor is going to be the one selecting what goes in architecturally at the front. And when we talk about how expensive architectural lighting is compared to standard lighting, it's true that those, when it's in that contractor budget, you might have as little as $10,000 for a whole home. It's really
Sometimes
distressing.
you will have less.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Very
it's
distressing
less.
to think
So
that.
I think we need to give a shout out to the interior design community for setting the contractor straight that $5,000 or $10,000 is not going to cut it. And most of the times we tell our clients, tell your builder to take the lighting out of the budget and let's just, let's just light your house the way it needs to be.
Yeah, it really is. The quality of the lighting and the lighting design that goes into the space is going to 100% impact every other part of the home, right? If you have a beautiful material on a sofa and it's lighted with a poorly colored LED fixture, you don't have a beautiful material on your sofa anymore. The experience you walk through a space is going to be greatly impacted by every light source that's in there. So it's really important that we kind of stop thinking about it so bilaterally. Like the architectural lighting and the decorative lighting should really be kind of merged together to deliver great lighting in the whole house. And really think through how to talk to your clients about, don't think about the architectural lighting as expensive, think about the value that it can bring to your space. And when you're spending X amount on your home, on every other part of your home, your lighting should be at the same quality level and the same design level as you're doing in the rest of the space. Otherwise, you're really losing out on that opportunity to make all those other things really shine.
Yeah, use the lighting to create visual comfort in your home.
Right.
And Klaus and Russ, how, again, it goes back to getting your client to understand, like they understand a couch and they understand they want this fabric and, they understand the chair, but lighting is hard for a lot of people, even in the interior design community. It can be challenging. And so how do you get your client to also well, I know you say, you tell them, what to do, but they still have to write the check for it, right? To get
works for them.
And especially as it comes to using, more modern type lights in your projects.
We know somebody in Brooklyn who goes after them. I'm kidding. It's a little bit like what Rush said, it's a lot of this is education, I think, for clients. I think probably most designers that are in the industry work with all types. Some clients come to the table and they've worked with design teams before, or professional teams, and others haven't. It's their first game. But a lot of it, in my opinion, in our opinion, is education. And if we can take them to a home or homes that we've done, that is a first critical step. But also really pointing out that, and we were talking a little bit about this the other day, you know, especially here where we are in this environment where the lighting from the outside and we have these giant big glass windows is such an impact, has such an impact on the interior spaces that you experience throughout every moment of the day. And so if you can point that out to people, because I think sometimes when you're just walking through a home, they just may not even notice that, you know, people don't necessarily see the nuances that we're trying to create. And if you can point that out to say, well, this is very intentional, you know, this experience over here. Or, you know, if you go in the evening time and you have a setting or whatever you might do, to say, this has all been very, very carefully planned out. It helps them understand that this, to Russ's point, this takes planning, this takes design. Abigail, you see this, right? This lighting design is such a critical aspect of putting a home together, because you're creating moods, you're creating atmosphere, you're creating an experience, you're creating like the sexiness. And those don't just pop out of nowhere. You know, they've really got to be thought through. And part of it also is really asking those questions to the client of, what do you want this home to make you feel like? One of the questions that we ask very, very upfront at the beginning of a process is, how do you want this home, how do you want to feel when you walk through your home once it's finished? Do you want to feel energized? Do you want to feel relaxed? You know, what are the words that come to mind? And getting them to get this into their vocabulary and getting them to think about this, I personally believe is a very important part of having them understand the value of what it is.
I also think that one of the things with lighting, that if you do a comparison of, you know, as a decorator, as a designer, it's easy to put materials in front of somebody and say, you know, material A or B, they can touch it. I think that touching is incredibly important. If you were to put a polyester in front of somebody and then put a cashmere, I mean, they're gonna, you know, they could be blind and understand the difference between cashmere.
You hope, right? You hope.
Right? And if they don't, then they're not.
Otherwise, they may need another designer if they can't tell the difference,
but
right?
Even
it might not be a good fit for you.
Right, and it might not have to be a cashmere, but it could be a really great quality linen versus you know, something that's lesser quality. And I think that being able to show the materials and quality is how you educate a client to invest in better quality, better lighting. You know, say, okay, I get it. Yes, I want to experience that.
It's an investment.
Yeah,
it really is an investment.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear you guys say that. I think we as a team at Visual Comfort and Circa are really working hard to figure out how customers can experience that, because I think a lot of it boils down to a lack of exposure in some sense. Like, people just don't talk about it or think about it. And if you're not talking or thinking about it, nobody's going to hand it to you, right? So I think, you know, in the Circa stores, a lot of them around the country now, we're putting together an architectural experience wall where we actually demonstrate, for instance, the difference between an accent light and a wall wash. Like, what does that really mean? And how does that change your perception of the space? And there's a lot of very talented Circa people. So if you ever need to send a client somewhere to understand, you can, shameless push, you can put them in a showroom, in a Circa showroom.
I think one of the example with the Circa lighting or visual comfort light is you have the Ralph Lauren light that has the thick, opaque glass. You know, I can't remember the name of the light fixture for a bathroom, but when you can see it on a wall, but when you actually hold the glass, you can tell the quality of that and the weight of that. And I think that's a very important thing, because you can't just see something. You have to touch it, hold it, feel it when you can, because that will speak to the quality, and that will speak to the investment that someone is willing to fork out the cash if they can truly understand and feel that.
Right. I think Charles can speak to the level of quality and detail that goes into everything we do, because everything we do is about the detail. And even if you look at just like almost anything, you know, there's a label, there's a finial, there's Thomas O'Brien on his pull chain. He doesn't just have a ball, he has a ball with a detail. on it. And I'll let Charles speak a little bit more to detail and making.
Yeah, I will just add on. It's funny because we're talking so much about being able to see the detail and the quality and touch and feel and the comparison in fabric. Going back to the architectural lighting conversation and getting somebody to sign off on investing in architectural lighting, it's hard to touch and feel. So it's almost, I imagine, and it's sometimes that way when I'm just working with a craftsman, trying to get them to understand the difference between something so that they can affect the change. I imagine you have to almost be able to take a person to a space in the dark and show them the difference in the light, just like you have them touch and feel something. But what Gale was saying about how we make things, visual comfort, and now across the broad company at Visual Comfort and Company, and certainly at Circa Lighting, everything we do is really all about the details. What makes the customer, the end user, the homeowner, the people that we're basically out here trying to create an experience for, what makes them fall in love oftentimes with our product, they don't even realize it's the detail. And that what makes our product great is that when you're talking about that thick glass and you can just feel it, or when you look or touch any detail, and Gale mentioned the little ball chain, it's true that we pay very close attention to every detail. We make sure that if something is supposed to look a certain way, it also feels that certain way. I always like to say that visual comfort product is one of the very few products in this world of home fashion and better goods that looks and feels much better when you get it than when you saw the picture of it, because Absolutely. Of the details that are there. And when we make connections, when you look at something, take a look at a piece of our product, and we're not the only ones in the world. There are a lot of great craftsmen around the world, but in this world of decorative lighting and better lighting, and in the craftsmanship level in making connections, and you look at something that comes together in three places and it looks like it's one piece, people don't know what it takes to make three pieces look like one piece. It takes an incredible amount of skill and an incredible eye for detail and a lot of handwork. And oftentimes the client doesn't even realize what makes it so special, what makes it so pretty. And speaking on the subject of modern, that is even more difficult in modern, because modern lighting, just like all sorts of modern things happening now, involve minimalized componentry, invisible connections. And you look in the marketplace and you see things from 10 feet away, they look okay, they have a nice envelope, but when you walk up, it's like if you had something and you thought it was beautiful and you saw staples in it, you see screws in it. We don't, the only time you see screws at Visual Comfort is if it's part of the design, not just holding it together.
And simple, modern, and Sean, I think you can speak to this too, as a designer, is that the simplest thing is the hardest thing to make, because there's no room for error. You can't cover it up. And, a more modern type piece, you're not going to see the seam, or you're not going to have a piece of trim over it covering up something, and you're not going to have a big handle cover on the on the socket that can hide the unfinished piece that's underneath it. It's everything has to be perfect and level and finished. So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Charles touched on it a bit. I mean, when we're, both in a factory working, and you're spending a lot of time educating a worker the importance of fine detailing, right? And, with tech, we're doing a lot of CNCing of parts versus die casting parts. And the CNCing allows us to get really refined details, but then you're going into very fine welding.
Define what CNC is for those who may not know what it is.
Oh, sure. It's a manufacturing process, right? So, just picture, a bunch of drill bits, making these parts, versus die casting. You have a mold and you're pouring metal material into that and you're producing it that way. So it's more expensive to do CNCing, but allows us, again, to go really refine on our detail. So on the decorative side, we use that. When we look at our element product, We're not stamping. Stamping is another manufacturing process where you're punching metal. You're not getting the same level of refinement. Your corners are a little bit rounded and blunted. Where on our element trims, whether it's a mud in or a flange, it's all die cast, and then it's back CNC to get knife edge, right? So everything is crisp, clean. And when you talk about spending a bit more, that's part of the reason is we're adding these other layers of manufacturing processes to it that normal people or normal factories or brands would not do. We go to that level because it's important to the overall design and envelope.
So before we go into our Q&A session, I have one more question that I'd like to open for discussion, because we've kind of got modern, traditional, all mixed together, from our makers to our educators to our designers. Let's talk about how we mix all that together to get a result that is appealing to a wide population.
Anybody?
You go, Charles.
Well, on the maker side, it's a lot of fun first to have all these things to play around with. I mentioned that I've been making things in lighting for the last 30 years. I was 20 years old, and I went to get a job as a lamp repairman in a lamp shop, and I fell in love with Chapman lighting, where this is a long time ago. And I think back about it, it was a cast bronze 3 egret legs, and in it was this like an ostrich egg that was made out of small pieces of shell. You know what I'm talking about, and a gathered silk shade. There were 4 or 5 things going on, but they all came together magically to just make you just feel just really, and I fell in love with it. And this is that, taking unbelievable materials that typically would have been used. Sean was touching on computerized manufacturing and crisp detail. To take a precision CNC or laser edge component and then have to connect it to another one using really fine welding, and then bring in a small modern light source, but then you might putting a linen shade right on top of it. Bringing it all together is a lot of fun on our side. Of course, you need the designer. As a maker in visual comfort, that's what we are. We're makers. We don't design anything. We rely on folks like our guests here and the people out there to provide us the inspiration and the real design. And then we get to take that opportunity to bring all these things together. Not to do a tease or anything, but we're working on the lamps, the actual light output. The world is full of non-modern technology, but it's all over, and our clients have all invested in it, and we've got chandeliers with traditional sockets for screw-in bulbs. But the world out there of beautiful light bulbs to fit into these traditional or even modern design, but traditionally built light fixtures, the light bulbs aren't there. So we're actually right in the middle of developing a whole line of what you'd call light bulbs, but that are special and beautiful and perform wonderfully and dim amazingly and tell their own story to allow people to use what they already have, if you will. And we are still making, imagine brass and crystal light bulb. That's what we're talking about here. And you would never even imagined it just a couple of years ago, because how could you light the brass and crystal and still screw it into your lamp? But we're doing that. And so to me, it's super exciting to be able to do it, to be able to bring it all together. So it's a traditional type of light, that it's a light bulb, but extremely modern.
Sean, for you in the more, modern part of it, bringing more, traditional materials, you're kind of doing the opposite of what Charles is doing, which is why it's such a
We're
great
doing this together.
marriage.
Charles and I work closely on this, and within the tech, working with some of the factories that Visual Comfort has used allows us to use some of this brass material, use more crystal material, canine crystal, if someone says, hey, I'm putting a canine crystal on a modern piece, you're going to think of your typical pear-shaped crystal, where we're extruding that crystal. We're making that more of a diffuser aspect to the light source, but maintaining, this purity of the crystal. So, that's where it gets exciting. Or, Charles works with Kelly Wursler, right? Kelly, materiality is amazing, right? She's pulling in quartz and doing it on more modern form factors. And it's amazing how Charles, working with the factory, probably scratches her head for a little bit, pulls all this stuff together, and now they work in the LED, right? And it's an incredible process right now in time that we're living in. Taking LED, now we're marrying these old traditional manufacturing techniques, material, and how do we modernize that into the world we're doing? It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
And Klaus and Rush, can you speak to mixing the two together, the modern and traditional, in your projects?
Yeah, it's, for me, if I can do an analogy on this, it's like having a symphony that needs to come together. And so you think about the architecture, all the finishes, the harmony of that in and of itself. And then you have all the other layers of the tile, the stone, the plumbing, the hardware, the lighting, the furnishings, the fabrics, every single detail. And so it's much like a symphony. You have a great violinist, you have a great oboist, you have a great drummer, you have all these different musicians that come together. And if, I love it at the beginning of a symphony where they're all like warming up, and it doesn't sound like anything special. And it's like, wow, how is that ever going to come together? And then, the conductor or the designer or the architect come in and they're putting everybody, together in harmony, and everyone has their notes. Everybody has, the highs, the lows, the nuances, the rhythm. And in our business, it's about all those things, the materials, the finishes, the textures, the mood, the lighting especially. And that has to come together in harmony. And so you have balance and form, the right lighting, whether it's architectural or whether it's decorative, there has to be a harmony between everything around it to be super successful, much like a symphony. And if somebody goes off in some direction, you're like, oh my God, what happened? So lighting can be that beautiful harmony that ties things together, but it has to be done well. And that's all about the design, holistic design component.
Are you writing another book about lighting anytime soon? Beautifully said.
We use that with our team meetings.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking of the book, the first question I received was, what is the name of the book? So the name of the book is Natural Elegance, Luxurious Mountain Living.
Thank you.
By Russ Jenkins and Klaus Baer. And again, if you're not one of the first 25 recipients, you should go get this book because it's absolutely magnificent.
Our company is WRJ Design Associates, and the book, it's our first book, hopefully one of many, and we are very grateful for all the people we have collaborated with. You too, your work is in that book throughout the book.
Thank you. Yes, believe me, it's the first thing I look for is our light. Scoping through it. So there's quite a few. So thank you for using our product. But the book is, absolutely magnificent.
Thank you.
It really is. Yeah. Okay. So do you think the average customer has adjusted to the difference in light color of LEDs? Who wants to take that? Abby, maybe?
Sure. So I think that in a lot of cases, people in the general public who are not thinking about the lighting when they're in a space would be shocked to find that about 90% of it is LED now. So whether you consciously have adjusted or haven't adjusted, you kind of have adjusted to it by its prevalence. I think that the development of LED, as Sean mentioned, moving so quickly, how smooth it is today, the color just gets better and better within months of each other. The drivers are better to be able to control that and have the dimmability, the warm dim, the color tuning, that's all on the horizon. It is so close to being available to everybody to use. So the downside of halogen, there's another question I saw here about LED and halogen. I think the beauty of its dimmability is undeniable, but the color of light, if you invest in a high quality incandescent, say MR16, it's beautiful for the first year. But after a certain number of hours, it actually has color shift and other things that happen. It turns amber, it turns green. You don't necessarily have consistency from fixture to fixture. There's problems with incandescent that we really never talked about because it was so predominant that LED is actually fixing. Not to mention, of course, the long life and the efficiency of LED sources. So it's at a point in the technology spectrum where LED can be a really great tool for you. And you know, it's worth investing in it at a little higher level to get that driver that works better and to get that color quality that's really gonna complement your project.
Well, and one of the questions of the difference between halogen and incandescent, halogen will burn your house down. So that, and it's also very hot. I remember when it first became really, really popular, which was a long time ago, I will say. And I was in a friend's kitchen and they had halogen cans in their ceiling, and they had just renovated their kitchen and they were so proud of all this, you know, new stuff. And you're boiling, sweating in the kitchen because they are so hot, and they can get really hot, very bright white light, and slightly dangerous as well.
So
I remember you know, there was a time where you'd have halogen torchères and they would be burning curtains on fire. And so
great uplighting though. They were good uplights.
on the original question about customers, if the customers had adjusted, what Abby was saying in the beginning is probably the answer. Since 90% of all the light we're all experiencing is already LED, and most people don't realize it, but I can attest to the fact that spending a lot of time in the wholesale showroom for visual comfort and dealing with thousands of interior designers and lighting buyers over the last 16 years, it was just a few years ago where it was a constant statement from the designer, oh, well, if it's going to be LED, I don't want to deal with it. And now it's the request. Well, it's LED, right? I think they only have the most of the people adjusted to it. They're now ready to ask for it, realizing all the benefits that you just described, Abby. So I think the answer is yes. The majority of everyone has, and there's so much great education available that if they haven't, it's just because they didn't realize that they had, not because they haven't. They just have it in their mind that they're not adjusted to it. Earlier, Rush was talking about bad LED. There's still a lot of leftover bad LED in the marketplace. There's still a lot of it in people's homes that doesn't dim right and flickers. And that's just a matter of bringing people along into the newer versions of it.
Somebody is asking, is Element the brand? Element is the collection, the name of the collection at Tech Lighting. So, Sean, maybe you want to answer that a little bit more.
Yeah, Element is one of our collections. It's our higher end recessed downlight product. We also have a product called Entra, you know, which shares a lot of the same LED engine and driver. We just do different manufacturing techniques to pull cost out. And then we have a product called Reflections. Reflections is an indirect LED downlight, which is beautiful. You know, indirect lighting is one of my favorite, right? It's not harsh in your face. So you have a 4-inch, 6-inch retro kit. So if you have a 6-inch downlight in your current home today, you can take out that trim and socket detail, and this will slide up in there, and you'll get a beautiful light source that's more indirect.
Great. So I hope that answers the person's question who's asking what type of Element lighting is best to light a living room when combined with decorative. So Element is the name of the collection of. I
would do square, beveled, flangeless, or round. Round's easier, you know, keeping everything straight. But yeah, if you can do mud in, it's just beautiful.
We have somebody asking if we could recommend lighting designers in various areas in the country. We can, and we'll reach out to you individually to find out where you are and what you're looking for. So might there be a suggested per square foot lighting budget figure? So Klaus and Baer, Klaus and Rush, I'm sorry. I'm going to let you answer that on the designer. I know what we at Circa recommend. It's usually not per square foot. It's usually a percentage of the cost of the building. So that's kind of how we use a guideline for the minimal amount, based on what the building cost would be. We usually say, somewhere between 1% and 3%, and that's for decorative. That does not include architectural. How do you guys decide what a lighting budget should be, if you even have one?
There's always a budget. I remember once when we had one of our clients, when we first moved to Jackson, we asked them about their budget. And they're like, "Oh, we don't have a budget." That's music to everyone's ears. And then we put a budget together. Oh my God, we have a budget. We have a budget. So, so I think that it can range, and there are lots of options of great lighting and reasonable price points for sure. You guys carry them. I mean, you have a lot of great options, and we use you guys all the time. But then if you also want to go to something that's really bespoke, so the range you could be a blend. I think that oftentimes that blend is where you have the bedrooms and other areas that are secondary that, you might have better price points. And then the key areas like the foyer or the dining room or the living room, you want to really amp it up. And I think that on the screen, for example, we did that Ralph Lauren antler chandelier that has all the rock crystal, which was pretty spectacular.
Amazing.
That's a $20,000 chandelier, but it's really huge impact. And I think that if you look at the range of a percentage, we've done a project that the lighting was 20% of the overall, so that's pretty high. And it just depends on really the taste of and the appetite of the client and selling them. I think that in design, you got to love what you do, and you better know everything about that. And then if you do and you're passionate about it, you'll be able to sell it.
This is interesting, and we empathize with this attendee who says they have wonderful educated clients who want architectural lighting. However, they're getting pushback from the site electricians and GC. They do not have the resources, knowledge to install high-end tech lighting. Is there any information to help ease their concerns? I find this an issue often. Well, the first thing you could do is find out when our CEU, Abigail, the next one that she's doing with us, and have your team attend it. And that will be helpful. But we do have information for you that will be helpful. And so we will also reach out to you individually and make sure that you get that information and access to anyone on our team that can help you through that process, including if we're in the marketplace, well, we can either come out personally, or we could have another Zoom meeting with your clients and their team to help them, get on board with something that we feel pretty strongly about. Would it make sense to discuss with the less high-end client, educating them to invest in high-end architectural and keep to upgrade later to better decorative fixtures? So it's always, I'll let Klaus and Russ speak to that, because that, that comes from the interior designer. If you have a client who isn't on board as much as you would like them to be with the lighting budget that you would like them to have, how do you discuss that with them?
I think that, there's two components. You have your architectural lighting, and then you have your decorative lighting. Invest in the architectural lighting to get it right. To rip out walls and to redo that is very, very expensive. And so do it right the first time. If you want to, compromise on your decorative lighting to begin with, you can always change out a fixture much easier than you can an architectural lighting. But I think that there's a wide range of price points, again, with Circa lighting and visual comfort that are very accessible. And I think it's about educating them on the quality and how important that is. And then define what the budget is. If it's something that's Home Depot price point, then that's going to be a little bit, there are lights in the industry that, you can find, but, usually I'll use a word like, well, that's interesting, or, oh, that's very unique. And, so the subtle, like, not to put them down, but at the end of the day, if you're going to hire a designer, you're hiring them to make your house beautiful. And there is going to always be a budget. And it's our job to know the range of price points and quality so that we can educate them and help them achieve the best that we can possibly do for them in that budget. But not, I like a metaphor that someone once told us, compromise, don't compromise, be flexible. A slinky is very, very flexible. It goes all kinds of places, but the moment you break that spine, it's no longer a slinky. So, be flexible, but don't compromise your values and aesthetics. And that's a different, so that, that sort of is a way for a client to understand. We have a lot of flexibility. It's in quality, and there's lots of choices, but we're not going to compromise a certain level of quality.
And how do you feel about floor lamps? Do you find them to be trendy or a cool feature? Hi, Aaron. No customer.
Well, again, it kind of goes back to something we were all talking about yesterday, which is, of course, the architecture that you're working with the home. Obviously, if you've got a floating living space, certainly you've got, in some cases, 20-foot high ceilings, and you're going to want really great architectural lighting. But I love the scale of what floor lamps does to help bring the space down to kind of a human scale. And it helps create that space, that zone, that living zone that you're wanting, in the case that I'm thinking about, in a living room, for example, to really make it cozy, to really make it just, a very lovely space that you want to just hang out in. And to me personally, if you don't have, whether it's floor lamps or table lamps or a mix of both, that's a missing element in my opinion. And maybe there might be some cases where they're absolutely, just that they don't work at all. Yeah. But I would say in most of the cases for us, we try to bring those in and really mix them into that space.
It also depends on you're using them. Floor lamps are obviously extraordinarily important. I think when you have a corner of a room, you're trying to create this ambiance, as Klaus said, but also reading lamps. You guys have a ton of reading lamps, and I love the flexibility of reading lamps. Even when you're not using it as a reading lamp next to a chair, to turn that on and with the glow that comes from that at night, and especially again on a dimmer, to be able to have it accentuate the fabric that it's near, or the pillow or the textile or the finish or the wood or the stone or whatever it is, that's really romantic and can be very, very nice. And that can't be achieved necessarily by, only architectural lighting.
And we'll stick with you for this one, Klaus and Rush. What is recommended solution for large rectangular dining tables? What kind of lighting do you like to put over a large rectangular dining table?
So, that's interesting. There are lots and lots and lots of choices. I think the first thing you should really consider is the overall architectural harmony of the pieces, the stone, steel, whatever it is, but consider the architecture and the finishes. And the light chosen, the decorative light that's chosen to go should be in harmony with that. The scale, the proportion, the finishes, all those things need to be considered. And it could be, we've seen the beautiful Lindsay Edelman, fixtures that are branching, those are fantastic. But there are also the linear fixtures that could be appropriate that have candles. And so there's a lot of options. And I think that it's all about proportion and work with the architecture and the interiors so that it all comes together in harmony.
Abigail, maybe you can take this one. Do you have a rule of thumb on layout dimensions for kitchen recessed lighting?
I don't really. What I do when I'm thinking through a kitchen is, again, as Klaus and Rush have been mentioning, you definitely want to understand everything that's happening in the kitchen. I tend to hit the task lighting first. So wherever you're going to be performing tasks, if you're going to eat at your island with stools, if you're going to cook on your back, you've got a countertop, start layering and lighting that will address those with maybe architectural lighting, and then add in the decorative to complement whatever the interior is. On vertical cabinetry, either you know, uppers or full height cabinetry, I actually really love using wall washing. If the cabinet itself has got a beautiful finish or some kind of element to it that you want to expose or enhance, then wall washing gives you that really even wash, and you don't have distracting hot arcs of light. And if you were going to wall wash, then I'd be looking at probably 20 to 24 inches out from the fixture and spaced about that far apart, and just in the section where the cabinets are.
And sticking with you, Abigail, this question is, I'm working on a new build modern home with many, many extra large windows. Are there different element products that adjust for the large amount of natural lighting?
Yeah, oh, I love that question. So we do have control options that would allow you to control to meet daylight. So you can invest in the right kinds of drivers and controls that will dim down the light as daylight is in the space, and raise the light up if it's less natural light coming in. And since they have pretty small apertures, they tend to be able to not distract from those views.
Excellent. Okay, how do you address lighting for post and beam architecture? Cavernous ceilings with no ability to use recessed lighting. Klaus, Rush?
Yeah, we've had a lot of actually, you'll see a lot in the book.
That is right up your alley.
It is. I think every house there's a few contemporaries we've done that don't have posts and beams, but there's a lot of homes we've done that have giant, big, beautiful timbers and massive wood pieces that are throughout the ceiling. And in those cases, the architecture has driven those decisions, and they've used monopoints, which are surface mounted little monopoints. And they are what they are. I personally would always try to say, let's try to figure out a way to get an architectural light in there that's hidden. In some cases, it's just not possible. And so that's what ends up getting used in those cases.
But I do think that, the number one thing to consider is that you don't want to see the source of light if you can avoid it. So there, with large timbers, you can route out areas within the timber and put in your strips of LED that are on a dimmer that can accentuate the ceiling and the wood. But it's extraordinarily important that at no point do you ever see that source. We were at a house where somebody did that, and when you got up the stairs on the second level, you were actually seeing the source of the strip, and it was like a runway. I'm like, that's terrible. So that's very, very important. I think that there are LEDs, there are uplights, but there's ways to hide it. Especially if it's an important detail and you want to accentuate the texture. Sometimes it's best not to even go that route and just have it be through the decorative lighting and have that be what really is the jewel.
And Sean, I'm going to let you talk to this. I think you spoke a little bit about it before, and you did this in your own house. So can the architectural lighting be retrofitted to the existing commodity 6-inch can downlight?
I did not do this in my house, but I understand what they're saying. We have two products. We have a 6-inch retro kit that gives you the appearance of our elements. You would take out the internal mechanisms, like most housings has a trim and a socket assembly that comes out. It's usually on a quick connect, and then you replace it with either our 6-inch retro or our reflections, which is the indirect product.
Okay. And we can, again, reach out to you and get you all this information on what these products are. Okay, our last question is, how does an architectural downlight function in a raised or high ceiling, for instance, 16 feet high? So Abigail, you may want to take that one what do you do when you have such a high ceiling?
Yeah. Well, I'll just touch a little bit back on what Klaus and Rush were saying earlier, which is that great lighting, if you want to mix in things. So a decorative suspended piece is actually going to give great light into a cavity that's tall and thin. But if you're using, and you can complement that with architectural recessed lighting, we have our 4-inch element product. It still has the small aperture opening, so it's very discreet. You're not going to get spots or hot sources. And it has a varying, you have a lot of options for the beam spread. So you can push the light down with a narrow beam spread, and you can choose how much light you need depending on your ceiling height. So That 4-foot product could come in 2400 lumen output up to 3200 lumen output. And depending on that ceiling height, you would select how much light you need to come out of it. So you can absolutely do aimable, small aperture, quiet ceiling point sources and a high ceiling with the element from Tech Lighting.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it. And this has been fantastic. And thank you all, Charles, Sean, Abigail, Klaus, and Rush. Thank you so much. Again, Natural Elegance. Go get your copy now. It's amazing.
And we're hiring, so, you know, if you want to get out of the big cities and, you know, get some.
And you
fresh
never
air.
know when I'm going to be looking for a job next. So, you
On my
know,
way.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
We
guys.
really appreciate it
Thank you
very, very
guys
much.
so much.
Thanks everybody for attending.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.